It is vital in any movie to capture an audience from the very beginning, and so those first few moments are key to keeping interest and giving viewers a good reason to get invested and stick around. There are literally countless ways to do this, but what about the death of a character? Rip that comfort blanket away and get the audience on the edge of their seats immediately. I mean, it's one hell of a way of kicking things off. So with that in mind, Casey Becker, Scream. Though it referenced just about every iconic horror franchise throughout, Wes Craven's Scream launched what would ultimately join the likes of A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween on that list. A big part of this was the shocking opening scenes that included Drew Barrymore. The star had been at the center of Scream's marketing campaign, and her character, Casey Becker, was seemingly all set to be the film's main protagonist. However, just over 10 minutes in, Casey was killed by Ghostface. During the iconic phone call that opened the movie, she was funny, she tried to fight back, and proved that although Sidney Prescott was a strong protagonist in her own right, Casey easily could have carried the film herself. Barrymore was actually initially cast as Sidney, but asked to portray Casey instead so as to immediately remove any notions the audience may have had over that character. If Drew Barrymore could be killed off in the first quarter of an hour, then who knew what else to expect? No one was safe. Vanessa, Deadpool 2. This is the one exception on this list when it comes to those being killed off in a sequel. For the majority of these characters, it's the end of their story, and they have no further impact on the sequel itself. This is certainly not the case with Deadpool 2's Vanessa, who still played a huge role in the film even after her death. Introduced in the Merc with the Mouth's first solo outing, Vanessa was the driving force behind everything Ryan Reynolds' Wade Wilson did. His sophomore effort was absolutely no different, even in spite of Vanessa's death right at the very beginning. When Deadpool's enemies followed him to his home, the love of his life was caught in the crossfire and killed. However, just like in the first movie, she was Wade's entire motivation. Only this time it wasn't because he wanted to save her, he wanted to join her. He would have these visions of Vanessa in the afterlife, where she would tell him that his heart wasn't in the right place. By the end, instead of wanting to die to be with her, she taught him that kids give you the opportunity to be better than you are. Though they wanted children of their own before she died, Wade still found this feeling with Rusty Collins, and thanks to her guidance was happy to live on. Charles Foster Kane, Citizen Kane. One of the most effective methods of keeping a movie character relevant even after their death is through the use of flashbacks. They may be gone in the present, but their story can still be told from the past. This was the case with Citizen Kane, widely regarded as one of the finest pictures ever produced. Back in 1941, the very first scene depicted Charles Foster Kane's death, as he dropped a snow globe to the floor and uttered the iconic word Rosebud. This set the entire chain of events into motion, as everyone wanted to know what exactly his final words meant. Throughout the story, more of Kane's life and character are dug up, revealing a complex, powerful and divisive man. Alongside the flashbacks throughout the film was a huge amount of exposition in the form of a news report that covered the man's death and helped paint a vivid picture. Even through a roller coaster of a politically charged life that had seen him become one of the wealthiest men in America, beloved by some and hated by others, his final thought was of his childhood sled, a thought of home, so many years after being ripped away from his family. Officer Alex Murphy, RoboCop. RoboCop opens with Officer Alex Murphy being transferred to Detroit, and when he was welcomed to hell by a fellow officer, they weren't joking. Day one saw Murphy come face to face with notorious cop killer Clarence Boddicker, and despite overwhelming odds, Murphy proved himself one hell of a hero by trying to take his gang down alone. He even survived having his right arm blown off and countless shots to the body before ultimately being downed by a bullet to the brain. Murphy made a strong impression within the opening scenes of RoboCop, and even though he led the movie, he was declared legally dead right at the beginning. Only instead of being left to a peaceful rest, he was brought back to police the streets as RoboCop, one of the most iconic action heroes of the 1980s. Harlan Thrombey, Knives Out. Rian Johnson's first Benoit Blanc mystery, Knives Out, immediately put itself on the map as one of the best whodunit stories in recent years. Among the many reasons for its success was the incredible cast of characters, inhabited wonderfully by a choice selection of actors young and old. Alongside the likes of Daniel Craig's Blanc and Ana de Armas's Marta were the wonderfully dysfunctional Thrombeys. kids, and at the head was the patriarch of the family, Harlan, played by Christopher Plummer. Though his death kicked off the entire murder mystery, he was present throughout thanks to flashbacks and managed to be one of the most fascinating characters in the entire film. Harlan made no shortage of enemies within his own family as he cut his grandson out of his will, took his publishing business out of his son's control, and told his son-in-law he knew he was cheating on his daughter, to name just a few. All this to put everything he owned in the hands of the one person in his life who actually deserved it, his carer and friend, Marta. Even in the face of death, Harlan comforted Marta, who at the time thought she had poisoned him, and saw the funny side. He even made a note for a potential kill in a novel he could have written, had he not unfortunately met his end at the very beginning. Dr. Malcolm Crowe, The Sixth Sense. These days, even the typical mainstream audience member knows what they are getting out of an M. Night Shyamalan film. There will be a twist at some point that will turn the entire thing on its head, and it's almost become distracting in that it's essentially a waiting game from the very start. However, with just the third movie of the director's now illustrious career came one of the most iconic twists in cinematic history. With no real expectations of a major plot twist at the time, the reveal that Bruce Willis's Dr. Malcolm Crowe had been dead from the start of The Sixth Sense was absolutely shocking. The story begins with Malcolm and his wife celebrating him being recognized for his outstanding work in the field of child psychology before their home is invaded by a former patient that he was unable to help. Crowe is shot, but seemingly survives as he begins his work with Cole Sear. It's not until that iconic reveal that both the audience and Malcolm himself realize that he was in fact killed during that home invasion, and that Cole was the only one who had properly interacted with him since. The man was a loving husband, a caring child psychologist, and the fact that he was dead was a gut punch to say the least. Eric Draven, The Crow. As far as movies with cult followings go, there aren't many as popular as The Crow, and it's easy to see why. The macabre story following Brandon Lee's Eric Draven on his posthumous quest for revenge is not only iconic, but almost stands as a lasting tribute to Lee, who was tragically killed during its production. In something of an unusual narrative direction, the opening shots of The Crow depict the crime scene in which Draven and his fiancée were killed. At no point in this film was its protagonist ever alive, but that certainly didn't prove an obstacle. This list has seen plenty of different ways to keep a character around after their death, but this one is unique. Enter the titular Crow. Though typically the Corvid carried souls to the land of the dead, sometimes a soul was unable to rest due to the unbearable sadness carried with it from something terrible happening, something like a couple being murdered on the eve of their wedding. In this instance, the Crow brought Eric Draven back to seek vengeance, which was carried out in spectacular fashion. Joe Gardner, Soul. Pixar's Soul was given a tough time upon release, as it came in 2020 at the height of the worldwide pandemic, and released both in cinemas and on Disney Plus simultaneously. However, the movie did ultimately win the Oscar for Best Animated Film and is a wonderful story about the beauty of life. In Joe Gardner, Soul had everything you could want from a protagonist. He was a passionate, lovable underdog who was just flawed enough to make a positive change in his life before the credits rolled. As a ridiculously overqualified middle school band teacher, Joe wanted to be a jazz musician, and on the day he earned his big break, what would have been the biggest opportunity of his life, he fell down a manhole and died. This was to be what transformed his life from meaningless to his dream, and so he didn't accept his death in the afterlife. The rest of the film is about trying to reunite his soul with his body to get back to his life, with the young Soul 22 on board for the ride before he ultimately learns that life itself is worth living unconditionally. He even sacrifices his own life to allow Soul 22 the chance to finally live hers. Danson and Highsmith, The Other Guys. Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg have collaborated on screen together a handful of times over the years, but better than both Daddy's Home and Daddy's Home 2 is The Other Guys. The two play detectives Alan Gamble and Terry Hoyts, respectively, a mismatched cop duo at the bottom of the office food chain who stumble onto something big in Adam McKay's blisteringly fun buddy cop comedy. In order to solidify their status in the office, The Other Guys opened with the more typical action hero hero protagonists of Danson and Highsmith. They were charismatic badasses that everyone on the force worshipped, and had the kind of star power that could have genuinely carried an entire movie. I mean, come on, who here wouldn't mind seeing Dwayne Johnson and Samuel L. Jackson lead an explosion-filled buddy cop movie? During a high-speed chase within the first 15 minutes of the film, however, the duo overestimated their athleticism and jumped from the roof of a building straight to their deaths on the pavement below. The whole point of their existence was to establish Alan and Terry's lives in their shadows, and by extension, they were almost automatically action stars. Their short time on screen was ridiculously entertaining, even though the point of it was parody, and a successful prequel spin-off could genuinely be built around them. Tree, Happy Death Day. Some movie pitches write themselves, and you just knew that a twisted take on the Groundhog Day concept in which the main character dies at the end of each day was going to be interesting to say the least. In fact, Happy Death Day was a surprising hit back in 2017. Initially, the audience is introduced to Tree Gelpman as a selfish, abrasive, and generally just unlikable human being. She wakes up hungover on her birthday and goes through the day before being murdered and waking up again to find the whole day's events playing out in the same order. Tree's unlikability is key for much of the story, as she has no shortage of people who wouldn't mind killing her. She goes through multiple different suspects before ultimately breaking the horrific cycle, but throughout the ordeal, she undeniably grows as a person. Who was once a spoiled brat began righting all of her wrongs and became a character for the audience to genuinely root for. While everyone else on this list died only once, Tree died multiple times throughout the original movie and even revisited the original time loop in the sequel, Happy Death Day to You. Bella Faulkner in Hunt for the Wilder People. Hunt for the Wilder People, directed by Taika Waititi of Jojo Rabbit and Thor Ragnarok fame, follows an unlikely father-son duo, Hector Heck Faulkner and Ricky Baker, as they find themselves as the targets of a manhunt. The two share a zany yet heartfelt adventure throughout the film. However, they would have never been brought together in the first place without Heck's wife Bella Faulkner. It is Bella's idea to take in Ricky in the first place, and between her and Heck, she is far more eager to have him around. In fact, Heck appears cold towards Ricky at first, with Bella playing mediator in all of their conflicts. Bella's kind heart and hilarious portrayal by Rima Tiwiata leads to some sweet and silly moments, such as her performance of the Ricky Baker birthday song. Unfortunately, Bella's early death kickstarts the film, shattering the possibility that the three of them could be a happy family after all. Once she is gone, it becomes evident how impactful she was at keeping the peace between the two leads. Ajak in Eternals. The MCU's Eternals features 10 title characters. It's only natural that one of them would barely make it past the opening credits. Salma Hayek's Ajak is the Eternals' powerful leader, with healing abilities and communications with the celestial Arishem. She keeps them safe and hidden during their centuries on Earth. However, Ajak's leadership skills and healing capabilities are not enough to keep her safe during the film's runtime. When Cersei, Sprite, and Icarus seek her out, they discover that Ajak has been murdered. This is not Ajak's final appearance in the film. She appears several times through flashbacks, solidifying her powers both as an Eternal and as a mentor figure to the rest of her family. In one powerful scene, she tells Icarus that humanity's devotion to each other, such as the undoing of the snap, inspired her to try and stop the emergence, which will destroy all of humanity. Angered that Ajak is questioning the Eternal's purpose on Earth, Icarus feeds her to the Deviants, leading to her death and the plot of the film. Though Ajak does not stay alive on screen for long, her impact on both the audience and the Eternals is huge. Heather Chandler in Heathers. Heather Chandler is one of the 3 title characters of the 1989 film Heathers. Chandler leads a clique of 4 high school girls, 3 of whom share the same first name, Heather. The 4th member, Veronica Sawyer, grows tired of Chandler's cruelty and bullying and vows to take her down. Veronica teams up with a boy at school named JD to get revenge on Chandler. The two offer her a fake hangover cure in order to cause her to vomit, but Veronica accidentally hands her a mug filled with drain cleaner she believes JD made as a joke. Chandler drinks the concoction and instantly dies. Despite her early out, Heather Chandler quickly establishes herself as a great cinematic Queen Bee-esque villain. She commands every one of her scenes, towering over her subordinates, including Heather Duke, Heather McNamara, Veronica, and any student who dares cross her path. Chandler is so powerful that even after her death, wearing her signature red scrunchie signifies possessing her power within the school. The late Kim Walker turns Heather Chandler into a memorable villain turned victim in what little screen time she has. Farsa in The Lion King. Mufasa's death in the 1994 film The Lion King became infamous for, no pun intended, scarring nearly every child who ever saw the movie. The character makes such a large impact that it's hard not to be scarred by his death, even as an adult. Mufasa, Simba's father, is voiced by the incomparable James Earl Jones. He quickly proves himself to be a just king and kind father. He is protective of Simba and firm with him when he steps out of line and visits the elephant graveyard, in doing so disobeying Mufasa and endangering himself. It is evident that so long as Mufasa is around, Simba will be safe. Of course, Mufasa is then shortly killed by his younger brother Scar in an attempt to take the throne. Scar knocks Mufasa into a stampede of wildebeest where he is trampled to death. If his fall was not painful enough, seeing Simba paw helplessly at his father's corpse is heartbreaking. Mufasa returns to Simba in a vision later on in the film, reminding his son and the audience that he'll always be with Simba. 1 in Moonlight. Despite having only 20 minutes of screen time, Mahershala Ali won his first Oscar for Barry Jenkins' 2016 film Moonlight. Watching the film, it's easy to see that awarding his portrayal of Juan is one of the best decisions the Academy has made in recent years. Juan exclusively appears in the first of the film's 3 segments titled Little. Juan, a drug dealer, takes Little, a young boy named Chiron, under his wing. Juan introduces Little to his girlfriend Teresa, and the two genuinely care for him. He also helps Little swim and teaches him that there is nothing wrong with being gay. When Little asks Juan if he is a drug dealer, he says yes, hanging his head in shame. Instantly after that, part 1 of the film ends and it cuts to part 2, titled Chiron. Juan is nowhere to be seen in part 2, and before long it becomes apparent that he has died. This loss hits hard and is especially jarring given the quick transition between the 2 segments and Ali's powerful performance. For Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. Spider-Man's signature catchphrase, "With great power comes great responsibility," is almost as famous as the wall crawler himself. That simple yet powerful sentence has guided Peter Parker throughout his time behind the Spider-Man mask. Uncle Ben is the man who first taught him that lesson. Uncle Ben first appeared in the 1962 comic book Amazing Fantasy No. 15, dying in order to motivate his superpowered nephew. Ben then made his way to many of the Spider-Man film adaptations. Played by Cliff Robertson in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films and Martin Sheen in the Mark Webb films, Uncle Ben's early death always hits hard. Peter's uncle is shown as an abundantly kind man, and Peter's failure to save him is a heartbreaking lesson in taking responsibility. Uncle Ben's death is a reminder for Peter to always do all he can, and his impact throughout all forms of Spider-Man media proves that he is an incredible character in his own right. Vizzini in The Princess Bride. For a character who dies so early into his film, Vizzini from The Princess Bride says more than his fair share of hilarious one-liners. Played by Wallace Shawn, Vizzini is hired to kidnap Princess Buttercup and murder her in order to start a war. After a mysterious man in black defeats his 2 hired goons, Inigo Montoya and Fezzik, the man confronts Vizzini himself. The two engage in a battle of wits, at which Vizzini claims to excel for Buttercup's life. Vizzini hilariously overthinks the simple question the man in black asks him: which cup has the poison? Vizzini causes the man to look away, then switches the cups. When he and the man in black drink, Vizzini laughs hysterically, thinking he has outsmarted the man, only to instantly die once it's revealed that both cups were poisoned and the man in black was immune. Wallace Shawn's portrayal of Vizzini, the foolish mastermind, is unbelievable. Shawn convinces audiences that Vizzini is arrogant enough to think he is the smartest man in the world. Plus, his plethora of catchphrases are always a delight to hear. The fact that Vizzini only places 4th on this list is inconceivable. Comedian in Watchmen. The comedian's death is the first thing to happen in Zack Snyder's 2009 film adaptation of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' comic book Watchmen. The film sees the comedian, aka Eddie Blake, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan. The story opens with Rorschach investigating the comedian's murder. As we learn more about the comedian, aka Eddie Blake, the bigger question than who killed him becomes how did it take so long for this man to get murdered? The comedian has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He does not hesitate to murder innocent people and has the audacity to blame Dr. Manhattan for not stopping him. He commits sexual assault against the Silk Spectre only to receive a satisfying beating from hooded justice after the fact, and it is implied that he murdered John F. Kennedy. The man deserved what was coming. Despite knowing his ultimate fate, it is impossible for audiences to sympathize with the comedian. He is well written in that he is impossible to like in any way, and if audiences knew him before the film began, they might have a different reaction to his fall from that window. Ellie in Up. Pixar's 2009 film Up swept audiences away with its opening scene. In it, we meet two children, Carl and Ellie, who make plans to go to South America, which Ellie describes as America but South. It's an adorable introduction to the film and its eventual leading man. Then audiences are treated to one of the greatest sequences in Pixar history. Carl and Ellie get married, start a life together, build a house, spend time together in love, prepare to become parents, learn that they cannot have children, and grow old together. Unfortunately, Ellie becomes sick and passes away, leaving Carl to sit alone at her funeral as the scene comes to a close. The montage contains no dialogue, but Michael Giacchino's score packs a heavy emotional punch. Throughout the film, Carl tries to make it to South America in Ellie's honor. Ellie's bravery, charm, and passing are a large part of why Up is so fondly remembered. Though the rest of the film is wonderful, it never comes close to the sheer beauty of the opening scene with Ellie. Mia Fey in Ace Attorney. In Takashi Miike's 2012 film Ace Attorney, an adaptation of the visual novel Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, audiences quickly meet Mia Fey, protagonist Phoenix Wright's boss and mentor. Mia quickly proves her competence in court when she almost instantly solves the case for Phoenix, proving his client Larry Bute's innocent. Phoenix himself is not a great lawyer at this point, fumbling papers on his desk and missing easy contradictions, but as long as he has Mia on his side, he should be fine. Of course, shortly after this trial, Mia is murdered, and Phoenix is responsible for defending Mia's younger sister Maya, who has been charged with Mia's murder. To make matters worse, Phoenix finds himself up against the fearsome prosecutor Miles Edgeworth without the help of his trusty mentor. However, Mia once again saves the day during this trial, where Maya channels her spirit to provide Phoenix with some much-needed guidance. Mia effectively avenges her own murder by allowing Phoenix to earn Maya a not guilty verdict and causing the arrest of her actual killer, Red White. Mia again provides aid from beyond the grave for Phoenix throughout the film's final trial, in which we learn why she was killed. Mia found a key piece of evidence that could close the book on a 15-year-old unsolved case called DL6. In the film's climax, Maya is able to finally channel Mia again, and Phoenix finds the piece of evidence Mia died for, hidden in the statue used to kill her, managing to solve the DL6 case once and for all. Even without her spirit being channeled, Mia plays an active role in the Ace Attorney film after her death. Mia is the mastermind behind Phoenix's defense, while also placing enough faith in him to allow him to grow into his own.